AI should be trained and deployed in the cloud. AI shouldn't be used if it doesn't solve a specific business problem. AI shouldn't be used if it doesn't help humanity, if it has high negative ethical impacts. So all of these things need to come as some prerequisites or in criteria when developing our artificial intelligence.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the D4 Data Channel podcast. I'm your host Deepak, and with me we have Ms Tijana Nikolic. Tijana has a background in both research and industry, and she has extensive experience working with AI technologies in various sustainability domains. She has also published papers on plant physiology and molecular biology. Tijana is also an expert in MLOps and AI ethics. Today we'll be hearing a lot about how AI technologies impacts climate change goals. It's a pleasure to have you here today, Tijana, and thank you for accepting my invitation.
The pleasure is all mine, Deepak. Thank you for having me here.
Great to hear. So, I have a couple of questions for you today, and starting with this one. So, will artificial intelligence help or hinder the response to climate change?
Yes, that's a very good question. So that's something that is currently a big point of research, and also it's very important from a research perspective, as you said, and also the industrial perspective. And what I like to always connect here is the ethics of AI. So how can we measure this, and how can we say that something is ethical or good for humanity and good for sustainability? Well, UN helped us a bit with this. So the United Nations back in 2020 set some sustainable development goals, or SDGs as abbreviation, which I will be repeating later on. So I will be referring to them as SDGs. That's a set of 17 overarching goals that have impact on sustainability, society, and basically humanity. So they all have a common goal of helping humanity. And these SDGs are interesting from an AI ethics perspective, and also they're interesting to answer the question that you asked: will AI be good or bad in terms of helping with sustainability and these very broadly morally accepted goals by the UN? And what UN says, and these SDG goals and people that research them says that AI can accelerate the UN Sustainable Development Goals for sure, but also there's a duality in it. So there's that positive side where AI can really help with sustainability goals, but also it can hinder them. So if you do a bit of research, you can see a lot of research papers that talk about where AI can impact positively specific targets of sustainable development goals of the UN, and where it can actually inhibit them. So what I want to say here is that for sure there's a huge impact of AI in sustainability, and we see that it's overwhelmingly positive. But we always need to keep in mind that it also inhibits some of them. And even though this proportion of positive versus negative impact is much bigger than the negative, we still need to make sure that we understand what that hindering part is, so we can take that into account when we're starting development, when we are doing research, or when we are shaping specific use cases for our business. And what I always connect ethics here, and actually what we do in Sogeti, as you said in the introduction, we have specialists in our team that talk about ethics and sustainability. And when we talk about ethics, we always have sustainability as a pillar. So SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals, are like the closest consensus of humanity to ethics and moral goals. So we always say, like, if AI has a positive impact on those goals, then we can say, yeah, this is like something that's universally accepted as positive, and we can see that AI has a very, as I said, a big impact on these development goals. And some of the positive impacts, and we will go into specifics of them later on in these specific examples, are using interconnected technologies such as autonomous vehicles, smart appliances, so we can improve gas emissions in cities and reduce dependence of fossil fuels, agriculture is a big, big part where AI has a huge impact. And as you know, agriculture has a huge carbon footprint, and we can't do without it. We need food. So, of course, it's something that has to go on, and AI can really help there. For example, I again talk about this from my background, but there's specific kinds of pesticides that have a broad range of impact on biodiversity, for example. And we can see AI helping with pests in a very localized way. So, for example, there's robots that use object detection to find pests and find, for example, pests in form of insects or plants. And they target them and pull them out of the ground, or they target them specifically and dislocate them from the plants that they're hurting. And this sort of like localized impact on biodiversity is something that we're looking for. And we see that AI has a very positive impact in these terms. The negative side, of course, is first, not every country can use AI in the same way as the other. Some countries also, and some maybe government bodies even, need to be a bit more open with data sharing, because the sustainability is the entire planet's issue. Let's say it like that. The climate goals impact the entire planet. And governments and legislations need to be all in line so we can actually enable these technologies to help each country in the same way, so they can all leverage AI's potential. So this is a bit of an inhibitor, because we need to make sure that we have communications and government bodies and legislations that help actually use AI technologies in a specific way that will actually have a positive impact and not hinder the development of specific countries. And of course, we have the hardware component of AI, which also has a carbon footprint. And we can never forget that efficient AI development is the future. And with efficient, transparent AI development and proper use of AI can actually have a completely positive impact without the hindering effects.
Okay, okay, got it. Over to the next question, Tiana. So, what are the impacts from the AI development side in terms of computational energy and hardware?
Yes. So again, great question. And I just mentioned that impact. So again, let's talk about transparency and responsibility of businesses, developers, and researchers. It's huge when using AI. And as I'm sure you know, and probably a lot of the viewers know, but if they don't, I'm just going to say it. Artificial intelligence sector is very, very high in its carbon footprint, because of the AI models need to be trained, and then the inference needs to be ran on them, and both of them are very computationally expensive. Potentially. So, for example, for deep learning models, MIT published a research where I think it's called Energy and Policy Considerations for Deep Learning. It's a very nice paper that has a systematic overview of different deep learning models in NLP and how big of a carbon footprint they have. They did research on Elmo, BERT, GPT-2, and GPT-3, and the transformers, sorry. So these are the four models in the field that have been responsible for the most significant improvements in performance. As you know, for example, also GPT-2 from GPT-3 has billions more parameters. So it was very interesting for them to see, and also for the rest of the world to see after they published their research, that actually GPT-2 has a carbon footprint that's 626,000 pounds of CO2 equivalent when it's training, which is 5 times more than the average lifetime car emission. And that's something that's used in most of the blogs and papers that highlight the negative impact of AI, where they say, okay, the impact of hardware and the computational energy is actually immense. And that's why it's important to not be afraid of this. This is something that's going to happen with the new technologies and with artificial intelligence, especially. We just need to be, as developers and of course as businesses, aware of this. And we say, okay, this might hinder climate goals of a company, especially if a specific business wants to become carbon neutral or net zero and they use AI. They need to make sure that that usage is responsible. So what do I mean by responsible? AI should be trained and deployed in the cloud. AI shouldn't be used if it doesn't solve a specific business problem. AI shouldn't be used if it doesn't help humanity, if it has high ethical, negative ethical impacts. So all of these things need to come as some prerequisites or in criteria when developing our artificial intelligence. And we need to have these sort of like cards, which are like the devil's advocate, let's call it like that. Like, if we develop this AI model, what sort of an impact will it have? And if we go even further, what I think the future of AI is, it has to be good for humanity, it has to be ethical, transparent. We need to use MLOps techniques to actually make sure that the development and deployment of AI is scalable and usable by all of the teams in the company. And yes, only if we do so, AI will have positive impacts on sustainability goals, and AI will have positive impacts on humanity in general. So we shouldn't run away from this negative or hindering impact of AI and the high computational costs. We should be aware of them. And another very positive thing is that starting last year, we have cloud platforms switching to green energy sources. So that's great. That means that you can train and deploy your models, even though they're computationally expensive, on very high efficiency chips. First of all, so cloud platforms are seeing this issue. They're providing high efficiency chips. We have a lot of and servers services. We have a lot of different MLOps techniques that, like quantization, that can help lower the complexity of AI models, making them more energy efficient and making the inference more energy efficient, because that's very energy consumes a lot of energy. And we see also cloud platforms becoming net zero and having carbon neutrality goals. So that means that you can always pick services that are deployed on green energy. So this will help, even though we have a negative impact. Again, this helps alleviate it and give hope for actually using green AI very close in the future, as I would say.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, yeah. So regarding that MIT study, like I was also aware actually, like regarding how much the transformers were actually creating this
Yes.
impact actually. Yeah. So over to the next question. So like there was a quote like this, so where AI affects the climate change both positive and negative, and most of these effects are poorly quantified. So what are your thoughts on it?
Yes, I think what I also said a couple of times in the first two questions, in the answers of the first two questions, is that if we are not aware of the negative side of AI impact, then we don't know what to quantify, right? So if you start off different research projects or business projects, you have to start with these questions first. Again, let's talk about a practical example: privacy issues. How do you know, like, that AI is going to have a privacy impact if you didn't even think about it before actually starting the development on it? So you need to be aware of it. And now you see businesses starting a couple of years back really focusing on GDPR privacy issues, because we had unfortunately a lot of negative examples in the industry of this. And right now, what we see, because of the, yeah, unfortunately, very big climate issues that we have currently, what we see is that this becomes a must for all of the AI projects, especially for projects of AI where AI is being directly used for sustainability goals. So we need to sit and make sure that, again, we have these very like burning questions at the beginning of use cases. It's as simple as that, very burning questions, and turn them into KPIs that can be quantified, so we can actually always have reports. Another thing that I would argue is, like, people don't like documentation and reports. I know that. But this is also something that we need to have, like a data quality report, model performance quality report, monitoring the model in production for data skew or whatever we need to monitor it for. We also should monitor the energy consumption and efficiency. And then only can we actually quantify and give our businesses and researchers, data scientists, broader data science community, the confidence that AI actually has a positive impact. And then we also talk about people that don't use AI, then they will also understand better what the positive and negative impacts are.
Got it. Got it. So like I think the past couple of models which I start building so using some services for carbon tracking, we used to start tracking the amount of emission, and
Yes.
that's so right now I think that's a label inside Hugging Face itself, like where we can specifically mention carbon footprint for this particular model is so and so amount.
Exactly. So you
Yeah.
have that for Hugging Face, but you also, for example, what we are doing in Sogeti right now, we are developing a carbon estimator solution, which is a unified dashboard for all cloud services, where we also want to use artificial intelligence to suggest how to
Okay.
lower your carbon emission over time. So you have forecasting as well. So yes, this is definitely something great, and especially because Hugging Face is making it open source. That's most of the platforms are making it open source. I really see
True.
that there's a hope for it in the future of being implemented in every development workflow.
True. True. Yeah. So over to the next point. So like, what are the emerging AI technologies that can compact this climate change?
Regarding the emerging AI technologies, they are very broad. So we have, you can use object detection, as I already mentioned it, in agriculture to have localized pest alleviation, for example, which is quite easy to do. For ESG, you also use NLP, so that's another use case. What I read about because of this podcast, and I already, of course, knew about it, but I read about it a bit more, is federated learning, which can be very advantageous in this area of carbon footprint. Because if yeah, your viewers don't know, federated learning is a machine learning technique that trains an algorithm across multiple decentralized edge devices or servers holding local data samples without exchanging them. So we like normal, let's say normal or traditional workflow would be putting all of the data in a specific database. And this actually decentralizes it. That's why it's called like that. And federated learning actually is a very energy efficient machine learning technique. And this is something that can be used for any number of use cases, and it actually has a very high impact in medicine as well. Again, I'm like a broken record with ethics, but sustainability and ethics really go together, because federated learning also, because it doesn't pull data in a central database, it also alleviates data privacy issues. So we have like multiple positive impacts. Again, much more energy efficient from training perspective and inference perspective as well. And another wonderful thing about federated learning is that it actually, and edge devices in general, it allows different points to communicate more efficiently. So if you remember what I said in the beginning, a more efficient communication between different governments, between different countries, between different institutions in a specific country can be enabled like this. They don't have to share data. They can just connect the models, and then we can have very robust networks and very robust models that can help with specific problems. These problems can be directly sustainability related, but they can also be other use cases. So this is something that's very exciting, and I really like it. There's also different platforms like a multi-mission algorithm and analysis platform. If you haven't heard about it, MAAP, which also enables communication between different parties regarding data points. That's much, much more easy. And yeah, I would recommend your viewers check it out. There's also iNaturalist, which helps researchers communicate better with their findings. With, for example, they can share findings about biodiversity or humidity in a specific part of the world, and then everything goes together in one platform. We can use those data points for different AI models. I'm mentioning data a lot. There is a data scarcity issue in AI in general, but especially here. So that's why I am really highlighting these techniques and platforms that I just mentioned, which actually alleviate this issue. And I think that's very exciting. So I think in the future, we're going to see, regarding using ethical AI and AI for sustainability, more platforms like this, more technologies that focus on this. And I will also mention, because I want to talk about specific examples of using AI, so I won't talk about it right now. MLOps, if your viewers haven't heard about it, which I really doubt, like data-centric model development and MLOps techniques and services are something that is really going to, I strongly believe, really going to create scalable AI solutions, help businesses use AI in a proper way, in a transparent, responsible way, and actually put AI at the level of what software engineering is right now. So we will have like specific quality checks for AI. Everything is automated. We will have services in the cloud that we can track very easily through APIs regarding cost and energy efficiency. And these are technologies and services that will really enable positive impact of AI on sustainability and in general.
Yeah, right. So one of the point which you mentioned about federated learning, like recently we had a podcast actually with a with a company called Adapt, and they have a particular product called Flower, which does this federated learning, and it's an open source platform actually. And Maria Bonner, she was actually explaining the entire stuff related to that particular product, and yeah,
Nice.
that's pretty
So
cool,
you can check that podcast out for that subject. Perfect.
right? So yeah, so one question like regarding the real life use case in which you saw the actual potential of AI in combating climate change.
Yes. Oh, I love this question because so my company, Sogeti NL, the company that I work in, not mine, the one that I work at, is part of Capgemini Group. And as part of Capgemini Group, we have we have Capgemini Engineering, and we have specific research groups that focus on creating white papers and reports on impact of technology. And we have one very nice report called AI and Climate Change by Capgemini Engineering. So I would, if you haven't read it, please do. It's really a robust report on how specific companies use AI with real life examples. So I'm going to be looking that way because I have it open right here, and it's my first point where whenever I get questions like this, because they really nicely separated these real life use cases of using AI for sustainability. So they separated it into three pillars. The first one is the use of AI in energy production and distribution. Second is manufacturing operations. And third is product usage, reuse, and recycling. And I will give you three examples of each of those pillars. So let's go to energy production and distribution. So, what can AI do there? I also mentioned it already, but it can track emissions at industrial sites. So, for example, ExxonMobil has teamed up with MIT to design and develop deep sea AI robots to boost their oil seep detection capabilities. And oil seeps could account for nearly half of the oil released in the ocean every year. So, impact of using robots and AI technology here is immense. So that's one of the examples where we can see AI in real life actually having a strong impact. Then we have manufacturing operations. So here we have predictive maintenance. That's of course, very like an evident use case there, and route optimization and fleet management. So AI can actually find much more efficient, routes that are much more energy efficient from a logistical standpoint, and help companies optimize the way they transport their goods. But also for maintenance, for example, General Motors has used image classification on nearly 7,000 robots to detect component failures, which leads to more efficient operations and lower energy costs. So you can actually use it to optimize your the maintenance and for predictive analytics. The product usage, reuse, and recycling, we have waste management and segregation. So we have Zen Robotics. They use AI to assess waste streams in real time and separate waste quickly. So they have high precision and very effective recycling. So those are just some use cases. There's a lot of them in this report, and if you're interested, you can have a read there. And also, what Capgemini Group believes is that businesses can really utilize AI for a positive impact on sustainability and their climate goals, with, of course, a responsible use of AI models.
Got it, got it. That actually like there are some very good use cases which you have listed, and it's really great. So over to the next couple of parts where like AI is actually impacting towards greenhouse gas emissions. So like so what are the applications of AI that actually reduces GHG emission in perspective of like the excessive carbon footprint which is created using these kind of larger models?
So I mentioned one thing that we're currently researching in Sogeti is actually using basically historical data of certain usage for projects, specifically for projects in business. So you can have projects over time that used specific services together with costs, and we can extrapolate the CO2 emissions from those costs and kilowatt or energy usage of the services. And over time, we can actually use that training data to train the models to give you recommendations on what sort of services you should stop using, what sort of services you should swap with the one that you're currently using so you can become more energy efficient. And together with, yeah, this is very important to have right there to train the models for these recommendations. You have to have very healthy data, and you have to have a lot of historical data from the projects. And right now, what we are seeing is that there's more and more open source data sets for this, which is very hopeful again. I'm very happy about that. So that's something that directly impacts it. And I really like it because, from a development and lean cloud perspective, it's something that's very impactful. So another use case where we can use AI with a direct impact on GHG emission reduction is, for example, for Google's DeepMind uses machine learning to predict wind patterns in their farm up to 36 hours in advance. That leads to closer alignment with the grid. What that means is that they can actually offset the emissions of their data centers more efficiently by using AI and predicting when winds are going to be optimal for energy creation. So that's another direct use of AI for lowering the emissions.
So, so regarding the MLOps and deployment, where your like primary focus area actually, like, so how, what to say, like how it is actually impacting whenever, like when we are employing actual MLOps cycle for an AI project, and how it's actually impacting the whole system in terms of climate change.
Yes, I already mentioned it a couple of times. So the MLOps way of working again is very critical about where is the model going to end up? Where exactly is it going to be deployed? Who is going to be using it? So again, we are starting off the entire MLOps cycle with that business understanding phase, which I think is very crucial in any AI model development to make sure that AI is scalable enough and usable and responsible. So I think the impact of MLOps in these terms is very holistic. So you can also take a look at whatever makes AI development more efficient has a high impact on using AI for sustainability. Because there's a lot of people arguing. Because I work in a consultancy, so I know what people think about AI. Our clients share their opinions with us very freely, which I really like, and they're always worried about that quality aspect of AI. Sogeti, for background, is a testing company. So that's why they always say, like, okay, how do you apply testing to artificial intelligence? Because we want to make sure that AI is of quality when we put it into production, the same as traditional software, sorry. So with MLOps services on different cloud platforms, and also you have open source MLOps services, we make sure that AI is scalable, that it's tested, that everything is automated so that you can actually enable quality AI in production. So there's a direct impact there. And I always connect it with ethics and quality, where we say, okay, MLOps can actually operationalize this ethical and responsible part of AI, which of course includes sustainability.
Correct. So, in this regard, like, so what are the common challenges and bottlenecks which you actually find in this, like, while employing this kind of setup actually?
The bottlenecks are usually the MLOps services are in the cloud, so maybe a bottleneck would be like actual financial part. So does a company have enough budget to deploy it there? And they need to understand, like what I just said. Some companies understand completely what the impact of AI is, that it needs to be as scalable and as tested as traditional software. But some people don't just don't see that. They usually think AI is just you train it and it can just run and it can be used and that's it. You don't need to do anything around it. It's like this magical thing that takes care of everything on its own. And AI is not as glamorous. I mean, it is a wonderful field of work. Don't get me wrong. I really like it and it's very exciting. But it also has the same things as traditional software development, which isn't a bad thing. This is something that really needs to be there. And you can always fall back on it. If there's something wrong happening in production, you can monitor it. You can get that, let's say, KPI, you can get that metric from there and you can actually drive different decisions, same as in traditional software engineering. So that would be the biggest bottleneck, that knowledge disparity. So you have people that are like people that do AI from a day-to-day basis. They understand the impact of it and that what the MLOps services are and what different hindering effects would be. And then you have the other side where people don't understand that AI needs to be tested as thoroughly as traditional software and similar things. So that would be the biggest bottleneck, the knowledge bottleneck. And right now, I think what we are doing currently in Sogeti at least is writing blog posts about it. We also have workshops and hackathons around it so we can educate more people about it. And I think that would be the biggest one. Honestly, regarding data collection and sharing, that's usually like just a basic AI negative side of AI model development. So I wouldn't say it's specific to this.
Got it. Got it. So yeah, so from red AI to green AI. So like, what is your commitment as a data practitioner in prioritizing energy efficient green artificial intelligence system?
Regarding that, I can say one thing. I already connected, hopefully, it translated well in the podcast, but I already connected ethical, sustainable, and quality AI together. So I can say, like, what I'm passionate about, what I write blog posts about, and what my team and Sogeti is passionate about is actually quality. And what we are doing, first of all, what my company is doing, they're giving us a platform to actually research this and to be aware of these problems. So I first have to commend my company for giving me the freedom to do so, which is very important. That knowledge gap needs to be filled in, and companies need to take responsibility and give their employees enough knowledge and freedom to actually have time to implement this in their development workflow. That's another thing I didn't mention it just now. I remember in the bottlenecks, you don't have enough time. Like the time to market is so short, you sometimes don't have enough time to do proper testing. So that's another thing that's very interconnected here. You need to make sure that you have time for all of this. And this is, again, a cultural shift. So that's something that my company is really allowing us. And also, we as developers, when we do different projects, we also make sure that everyone understands why we are taking so much time in setting up these services, doing testing, and we make sure to educate people along the way. So that's something that we do. And another thing that I want to mention is concretely, we are developing a quality AI framework in Sogeti, and we have a Streamlit app for it as well. I also have another Streamlit app which we developed. It's called the Data Quality Wrapper. I think you actually found me through those blog posts. And these are some, yeah, we're really want what we want to do. This is all open source. What we want to do is have a hub of knowledge that we share with other people. This knowledge sharing actually helps with all of the bottlenecks, with all of the hindering effects. So I mentioned it like again, like a broken record. This is something that I strongly believe developers, business owners, product owners, companies need to keep in mind that they need to educate themselves on different effects of artificial intelligence and other technologies, positive and negative. And they also need to educate themselves on the best practices to alleviate the negative effects. Regarding the quality AI framework, this is a framework that focuses on quality of AI together with sustainability and ethics. And we have different problem statements and theoretical basis of how you should think and what questions you should ask yourself, together with some packages that you can use and examples to alleviate uh, different problems that you may have with artificial intelligence in development and deployment. So this is what we are passionate about.
Great. That's great to know. So regarding the AI adoption in these fields, so like, how effective is AI in natural disaster management?
In natural disaster management. So, regarding natural disaster management, it is very effective. I can also give you another example in real life. For example, if you remember, I think everyone does, unfortunately, California forest fires that happened recently, also in Australia. This actually brought the government in California to do more research about what can AI be used for in natural disasters. And what I can give you an example is that utilities in California are using drones together with computer vision to monitor transmission and distribution of equipment that is highly flammable, that can have a negative impact on the environment, so that they can very quickly act locally. And when something is detected and something alerts specific teams, so they can alleviate any risk that may happen. Another thing that we have also worked with Sweden for, Sogeti Sweden has worked on using drones to detect beetles in forests, which are pests, so that you can actually go and alleviate specific. Yeah, you can cut down the trees that have been infected, for example, or you can act on the beetles that have infected a specific area. Uh, Another thing is definitely, so those are like some natural disasters like pests, wildfires. Another thing is, for example, zoonotic jumps. Those are jumps of viruses from animals to people. What we see also is a lot of research and actual potential usage of AI in this. So you can use genomic data to see like which parts of the genomes are connected with this, and use AI to detect specific parts of genomes in new viruses, for example, or viruses that may jump from animals to people, so that we can actually alleviate this risk. That's another use case.
Got it. Yeah, so like I think so in my previous company, like I think 3 years back or something, so we had I was part of actually one project related to this California wildfire. So it was Woolsey. So it was called Woolsey fire, and like we were collecting the, so actually the data collection was more kind of like manual at that time. Like they were manually writing down the debris collection report and so on. So we actually automated using computer vision techniques there, where we kind of
Amazing.
extract the data automatically, and we applied some NLP to kind of extract some specific data, like what is the waste, what is the tonnage, and all those things. Yeah, I remember
Yes.
that actually. Yeah, when you said about California, it just
Great.
came to my mind. Yeah, so my last question for today. So like, what is your message to the data community in terms of using AI for good initiatives?
My message overall is always stay curious and always continue educating yourself. And every time that you want to use a specific technology, think about like, can I, does this have a negative impact? And every time you start your development workflow regarding sustainability and using AI for good, have that critical mindset. It it is difficult sometimes. I understand that. Yeah, I. It's just some people might not be as comfortable to say stuff like that. So that's why I think there's a big thing. I want to speak to the the broader data science community, but I also want, if any business owners or product owners see this, I want them to also understand that they need to give the platform to their development team to do this. That is why I highlighted how I really respect that in my company. We actually are given this freedom and this wind in the back to actually stay critical and of course stay efficient. So that's something that I would like to give as a message for the end.
Thank you so much actually for that. And yeah, so that covers all my questions for today. And once again, I would like to thank you for all the information you have provided, and like in terms of how it's actually being, how the AI is actually being used in production, in real life, like how it's actually being able to kind of mitigate a lot of potential causes in this particular climate change. And it's pretty cool. You actually formulated it really well to the audience. And yeah, thank you
Thanks.
so much for it. Really appreciate it.
Again, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you for the platform, and yeah, thank you for being a great host as well.
Thank you very much.